Hey, welcome everybody to episode 73 of The Corner Blue. I'm Andres Rico and I'm here with Hugo Alvarado. Here we are for yet another episode. We have another Nations League window, so we want to break down. Plus, there's a lot of interesting info coming out of the motherland. But before all that, I just want to give a shout out to everyone that's on the East Coast dealing with the hurricane. Hope you and your family that are out there are safe. It's a very delicate situation. I've been following up on it in the news, and yeah, we just hope that you're doing all right and you're doing safe. So yeah, just thinking about everybody out on the East Coast, Southern East Coast, dealing with the natural storms that I think as Salvis we're all used to one way or another, and that's why we want to show our solidarity with you. So hope you're doing all right. But now we'll move on. Hugo, how are you doing, man?
Great. Excited for the next two matches. Hopefully we can get the two wins and secure our spot in the next Gold Cup.
Yeah, so the team is already, and they're playing. Are they playing in St. Vincent? Am I
Yes, both
correct?
games.
Yeah, so they're already out there. We haven't got any news of anything interesting happening to them on the way out there. So hopefully everything will just go smoothly, or as smooth as possible heading into the matches starting Thursday, and then the second match is on Sunday, right?
Yep.
So, this whole week there's been some interesting news coming out of El Salvador, specifically about Brian Hill and his n omission from the call-up squad or the call-up list. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit because I think it's something interesting that's come up, and then on top of that, you know, La Selecta's already down, or in terms of its player pool, who's playing abroad, who's getting minutes abroad, and on top of that, there's the infamous opting out of Zabaleta and Roldan, and now to lose such a delicate piece, I guess you could call it, in Brian Hin, someone that was courted for a long time by the Hugo Perez regime and trying to bring him in, and it didn't happen until the first qualifying campaign was over. It's obviously it obviously is a little anticlimactic in terms of what's going on with the whole Brian Heath situation. What's your take on it, Ugo?
Well, look, there's different ways of looking at it. Um, First of all, I think it's undeniable to a certain extent that, and I've said it, that he's a type of forward that we don't have in El Salvador. And I know, and I'm not just talking about the height or I mean, Steven Vasquez is probably taller than Brian Hill, but the combination of Brian Hill and what he brings to the table, it's quite unique and different to anything else we currently have available in El Salvador. With that being said, there's also the argument about who's at their best moment right now to be in the national team. And if we go by that rule, he's been barely playing in Colombia. He hasn't been getting many minutes. Um, Now, there's the Salvadorian media. Honestly, I understand their job is to sell newspapers or to generate clicks on ads on their websites, and they're always going to try to focus on the questions that can generate um, polemica. Always. I mean, we see it all the time, and Hugo Perez was a target of that a lot. Hugo Perez was very outspoken. He was very transparent in many ways, and the media, although some of them ended up being the ones attacking him, they actually benefited from his style a lot because he spoke a lot. He said a lot of things. And I think that Dóniga, managed the situation, which seemed to have gotten a little tense. I thought he managed that in the most professional way possible. He made it very clear, I think, in my opinion, that he had a private conversation with the father of the Hills, and according to the press conference, it was the father who reached out to him for support to have a conversation, which it looks like the father broke the agreement of keeping the content of that meeting private, and he spoke about it. I cannot confirm or deny any of the of the some of the information that the father filtered, but I think that when somebody talks about, yeah, he was upset about something and he didn't greet the coach, and then of course some fans, some media will say, well, that's not enough, or that's those are not grounds for not calling up a player like Heel. But I think there's more to the story. It's pretty obvious there's more, and we get little pieces here and there. And honestly, I do feel that that's information that is better off private. And I think that was the way it was meant to be, because then we ended up with a whole bunch of speculations about who did this, who did that, and so and so said that, and then it just turns into a big mess, like a telenovela type of thing. But if I want to be, if we, for years, I've heard the argument about, let's bring discipline to the national team. Everybody has different ways of looking at discipline and whatever that means for them. But then somehow it seems like when somebody decides to implement it, there's a sector of media and fans that don't like that. And there's always, that whole thing about que los jugadores le hacen la camita al técnico because they didn't like something the coach did. And there's all this conversations around the players don't like to work hard, or the players don't like to be disciplined, and then when a coach, and again, I don't know the situation to be confirming or denying it, but obviously there's something happening there. I've met with Dóniga on several occasions, and I think that he's a highly professional coach who, he has his way of looking at the game and looking at life, and again, everybody's different. But theoretically, let's say whatever the father filter is what happened. I think there's more to it, but let's say it was that. If I show up to my job and the owner of the company, or let's say one of the top managers is there, and I'm mad because the team went out for dinner and they didn't invite me, and the manager comes to me and he tries to shake my hand, and I just turn, I give my back to him, and I don't greet him. Do you think that's going to create a healthy relationship between me and the manager, and eventually the team as a whole? I don't think so. So again, I hope things could be fixed, but all I'm saying is that there's always going to be those who, for some reason, when somebody does implement the rules, they don't like it. It's like we want to. It's like we want to apply certain rules to some people or some players, and then different ones for others. And I don't think that creates a healthy relationship. So, anyways, it's a very long answer to your question, but for the good of the national team, I hope things could be talked through and fixed. But at the same time, I do think that in teams or any other profession or job or whatever you do, I think it's important to be respectful to the hierarchy of the organization and your workmates or your coworkers or your teammates. And I think each person is responsible for behaving in a way that is respectful towards everyone.
And yeah, just to contextualize, because I think we forgot to do that. Um, Basically, what was leaked or the info that Brian Heath's father, who's also his agent, gave out was that supposedly there was an incident where Brian Heath did not return a greeting that Dóniga gave him during, a call up, um, and also was told the media in the same call that he didn't think that Brian was doing enough to deserve a call up based off his performance in Colombia, and that he was hoping that he and the coach can help guide Brian through this situation, which I mean is an interesting PR move. I agree with you. Sometimes you need to just keep things in-house, especially with how things can get distorted and be a distraction. And that was something that I noticed with the normalizadora or the regularizadora, how there'd be like a lot of um investigations that were put out there for the media to know, like the whole Enrico situation, to name one, the partying in the hotel after the game with Peru, if I'm not mistaken, that type of stuff where you could keep it in-house. um, I think something with this is just indicative of more. Just this whole chapter with the Heath family has been interesting from, trying to court the oldest brother. He was the one that was in the sights of trying to get into the national team. Yet before he even says yes, the other brothers are called up. You could even speculate that maybe that was part of the deal to get him to accept the association change and commit to Salvador. Um, but then you'd see him and Maya on the pitch, and it was like they were having a hard time understanding each other. So it was just something that didn't necessarily fall into play on the pitch. Brian himself, as a striker, there were those matches against the US that you saw, okay, we have potential of competing with the US, especially when we have a striker that can put the US's center backs, on their toes. But since there's just been a drop off in level of the brothers in general, you're not seeing highlights coming in from Colombia, as was mentioned in public, and it is public information. The minutes that Brian is getting are very low. Um, so a situation like this is just oh, and then there was a situation where they were called up and no one was at the federation to pick them up, according to the father. So that was just something else that was aired publicly. Then there was a match, I think it was against Martinique, if I'm not mistaken. Martinique or Montserrat, I'm blanking, where Mayed was visibly, starting an altercation with his own teammates on the field. So I feel like this is something that's been brewing at the surface. And yes, something needs to be done about it because for the interest of the national team, you need to have your best options there. And on top of that, a precedent has to be set where if you're called up, it should be one of the highest, it's the highest honor if you're a professional player to be called up and play professional or international ball. And to use or to seemingly use the national team for your own interests or to, it just looks to me as if the national team is being used for their own interests instead of respecting the legacy, respecting the kit. And I think that's a precedent that needs to be set because we can't just cherry pick and try and find the best pieces in terms of talent. We also have to find the right people that can add to the team. And I think there's a intricate and fine balance between that. And it's something that we're still looking for. Um, because, like we mentioned here several times, playing for the national team when you have many nationalities or more than one is a very personal process. But then once you're there, once you've made the decision, what are you going to do with that? That's a responsibility. And we've seen different takes or ways of handling that. Some that I don't necessarily agree with. Um, but at this point in time, it is interesting that El Salvador doesn't have many players abroad. Now that we've found more pieces abroad, there's these different variables that occur from, you know, you having your fantasy team of Salvadorians abroad and based locally in terms of the national team. And so we're going into some of these matches with what I would consider not our best weapons, but because there's all these different variables in play, and I think as fans fans must be very frustrated with that, where you could think, okay, who's one of our best center backs of the last 3 years? You think of Zabaleta. But then on paper, you see his minutes. He's not game fit, and he wasn't game fit last year. Um, and Hugo Perez took a risk bringing him in, not being game fit, and we saw the production that he gave the team. Um, but yeah, I think right now, I think it's just that mode of frustration that's set in where it's like, okay, we look for the talent, we get the talent, but then something isn't translating into, you know, these pieces fitting in and helping us find success. And I think that's the main question that needs to be solved is, how do we get these pieces and make them gel because we don't it's slim pickings out there. We don't have too many places to find players of certain calibers to have them just opt out. And I think that speaks heavily on, you know, obvious administration woes. Um, Hopefully the coaching staff can figure that out along the way. But it is disappointing to have yet another piece found from from the outside that can add to, where we are lacking, not playing. And so we have to start from scratch. So that leads us to the call up. Uwo, what are your thoughts on the squad that's been called up for these matches?
I think we're in on many positions we're starting to see consistency, the consistency that you've been asking for a long time. Our defenders are usually the same. Our midfielders tend to be the same for the most part, and our forwards, with the exception of Brian Hill, are also about the same. So there are some new faces there that I'm pretty happy to see back on the squad, such as Ronald Rodriguez. Um, I'm happy to see Ronald back. I think he's a piece who can um, add to the team. He has the height and the strength that we lack right now in center in the central defenders. And then there are players like Santos Ortiz, who I for a long time we've seen him be quite successful and be a player that, according to your performance in the local league, you deserve to be called up to the national team. But he has yet to be able to transfer that to a national team level. So he's getting another opportunity. So we'll see. For me, he's a big question mark. So when you start looking at watching games from a different perspective and not just from like a fan perspective, you start seeing patterns. And like I've been watching, the team kind of plays on one side and kind of sticks to one side. And it seems like we don't really like rotate the ball that much to try to attack on the other side. And I was watching the Dóniga's clip on the what's it called? Um,
The coach's voice.
the coach's voice, and then you kind of understand a little more how he's trying to play. Um, so so I think from that perspective, it seems like our team has struggled a little bit to understand the method that he wants to play. So, coaches call the players who they think are capable of adapting to a system that they're trying to implement. And I mean, and the positive that I see is that we are starting to see some of the same faces returning to the national team, and hopefully that helps in the way that they start playing the system that we want to play. Um, Menjivar is out, and I think that Menjivar has been struggling for a while. And I think the coach was trying to give him an opportunity to kind of pick up his level. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's just a few changes I think from the previous call up. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think look, some of the guys have been doing a pretty decent job with the current rivals that we've had. I think the defenders have done well. They've done okay. But again, we haven't played teams that really push us uh, much. So I think for the current games that we're playing, what I like to see more is try to see a little bit more. Now that I watch that session with Dóniga, like I'm going to be focusing more on that. But I like to see a little more coordination. When we try to do that attack and start to pass the ball on one side of the field to get the other team to make a mistake, or get desperate or open up, or we end up sending a long ball to the other side. I like to start seeing more coordination with that. And I think if I see a little more of an organized um, passing of the ball and generating opportunities to score goals, I think I'll be happy with that. Of course, and we need to win, but it's pretty obvious that at least in the last game against uh, Bonaire, the overall play of the team was not that great, and I think that was part of the biggest criticism, that it looked choppy at times. Like we didn't really seem comfortable. We didn't seem comfortable with the ball. Unlike the time they beat us, when they beat us, or when we drew them in
Yeah, it was a draw.
Washington
Calm down.
D.C. I think we looked a little better. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When we had the draw at DC against them, we looked a little better. I mean, I honestly, for me, I also hate the fact that we have to play on an empty stadium, the same stadium, artificial turf. I don't know if this is going to be better, but for any national team, it's very difficult to play on an empty stadium, a competitive match that appears to be more of a scrimmage, a closed door game. So hopefully there's a little bit more activity on the
I
on the
mean, the,
stands this
the
time.
the format of this tournament is just kind of absurd. Like playing your home games away, it doesn't make much sense if you're going to have these matches in a place that doesn't have the best of infrastructure. Like, why not find a neutral spot somewhere where there's a bigger field, there's a chance of fans going to it if you wanted to, you know? I'm not saying have all of them at El Cusca or at Flor Blanca. I'm just saying like you could find a better neutral spot than where they have been playing. And yeah, it is a weird tournament so far. And like you said, watching that clip from the coach's voice, it's available on YouTube. We'll probably share the link later on so y'all can check it out because it is an interesting insight as to what they're trying to put on the pitch. Basically, the main concept is trying to find one sector or flank in the pitch from the middle to the edge of the flank and trying to put as many numbers into that space with and then having your back line ready to adjust and stop a counter. And the bet that Dóniga is trying to make is by flooding numbers into a certain sector of the pitch and trying to break lines via a pass or trying to find 1v1 situations. I think, and then if there's a roadblock, then using as a recourse, trying to swing it into, the other side of the pitch where your winger would be free for either a 1v1 situation to try and get into the box or to make a pass. Um, and I think, yeah, now after watching it, it makes sense seeing the style of play. I just think unfortunately the way that it's been interpreted is we see guys receiving the ball and then just starting to run forward or just the same play down the same flank over and over and just a level of predictability, the same pace. I just see a lack of creativity, a lack of having someone control the tempo, make plays happen, but usually you just see the fullback linking up with the winger and then trying to take things from there or touches in the area. I mean in the midfield, in the center defensive midfield area, but not necessarily building up to anything. It's just trying to get away from the marking or the press of the other team. So if this style is going to work, it's going to take people that can get string more than 4 or 5 passes together, which is something I feel we've struggled with, especially in an attack. We can have the ball, but if we touch it around in a way that doesn't move our rival or threaten them in any way, it's just empty possession. So we'll see if things can get tweaked around. Like you said, you're seeing more consistency with this lineup. You're seeing more the veterans are still being called up. You see Larin back, Darwin's in the middle. You see a lot of the Aguila midfield playing together, which they've been having a pretty decent season so far. So I think he's just betting on the familiarity. I don't see a 10, a classic 10. It's a dead breed basically. Um, but hopefully they can start stringing those passes together and getting into the final third. But anyway, you should definitely check out that video. It's interesting, and then it gives you insight into what's trying to be done on the pitch. Um, I'm just curious to see what it's going to look like against a heavier or bigger rival. Um, so if anything, these matches serve the purpose of trying that out. And my hope is the players adjust to it, but I mainly that Doniga sees if it's not working, how he can adjust it to the players that we have. That'll be a huge, huge factor in terms of, success moving on forward is, how much can be tweaked because I think the lack of tweaking for uh, yeah, the lack of adjusting, not tweaking. The lack of adjustments, I think, is something that did not help the previous regime. I think some adjustments had to be made and they weren't. And you know, 2 coaches later, we're talking about this. So I think that'll be key. Another perspective too is time's running out in theory because as soon as the new board is elected, which I don't, who knows if it's going to happen anytime soon, but whoever is in charge starting in April has within their power to either continue with this process or call someone new in. And that's another thing that needs to be thought of as well. But yeah, it's the second to last window for the year. We'll see how these matches go. Again, Caribbean games are a whole other beast, and it's hard to see how that fits in with the bigger picture. But I think it's just unfortunate that you're starting to miss pieces heading into this. And well, one thing that I wanted to ask you, speaking of the pieces, one of the listeners asked if somehow there was any update on the MLSers that have opted out, Rodan, Zabaleta, and if you in your capacity as a scout have had any communication or what your role is in terms of the possibility of, reaching out to them once again and seeing what their status is.
I mean, I don't have any updates, nor is it my role as of now. At least I'm here to be of help to the national team as I've always been, and it comes down to what I'm asked for. If a sporting director calls me and they say, "Hey, Hugo, you're in LA. Can you go and meet with Zabaleta?" I'm going to go and meet with Zabaleta. And I would do the same with any other player. But of course, I keep my relationships with them the way they've been, I mean, uh, going back to Zabaleta, I think everybody knows that I started scouting him and talking to him since 2010. He only started playing in the national team in 2020. For those 10 years, I was having constant communication with him, or at least checking in every 6 months, 3 times a year. So I have a relationship there. But again, there are certain things that go outside of my scope. And, but yes, of course, if the national team asks me to go do my scouting duties at a different capacity, I'll be more than happy to do that. But like I said, there are certain things that I think is important, at least in my capacity, to respect each person's role in the national team and what we each do. And there are certain things depending on for example, Ordaz. I know Ordaz. He came to one of our camps that we did back in December 2021, I think, with Hugo Perez here in LA Community College. He showed up, and Diogo, when Diogo was around, he asked me for, "Hey, can you put me in contact with him?" I I did that. I did just that, and then the rest I leave it to them. And of course, if I'm asked to do something differently, I'll do it. But yeah, I'm probably, unless somebody asks me, I'm not going to. Of course, in a more of a friendship capacity, I might bring up the conversation, but I don't think I will be doing any good to the national team if I start sharing too much about that.
For sure. And then also, what's your take now that Gama is has been relieved of his duties? Like, how was it working with him? I know you've dealt with different coaching staffs in different capacities, different levels of involvement. Um, how was it working under Gama, or how was the process of working under him?
Well, there was definitely a lot of communication in the early days when I was looking to see if my role was going to still be supported and recognized as an official role. Given that Diego Enriquez, who brought me in, left, and then we had a whole year gap with no sporting director. I was still communicating directly with Hugo Perez, but I was like on limbo. Like I wasn't sure if from a sporting director's perspective or from a federation's perspective if I was still officially the scout. So when Diogo came, we had several conversations, and he was very supportive of me in terms of um, giving me the ability to continue doing the scouting work officially. And then it was, more of a communication every now and then when needed. At some point, I started when I went to El Salvador back in January for the Inter Miami game. I was officially introduced by Diogo to the senior coaching staff, and then at that point, I began having more of a direct connection and relationship with the senior coach. So the communication with Diogo was less because I was dealing directly with the coach, and so it was a combination. But it was I would say it was it was very more on the professional side, and I would say that he was very supportive when needed um, for what I was doing.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's always some level of instability with Lefes Food, and the hope was by finally bringing in a sporting director to try and fill the shoes that Diego Enriquez left. Um, yeah, you just had a lot of interesting things happen with the firing and hiring of coach, then having to hire a new one because that one left after a couple months. So I feel like overall the tenure was interesting to say the least, and the results we have yet to see. Because if somehow Dóniga pulls us off, then then we can recall that Gama was the guy that brought him in. Um, so yeah, we'll see who's the next person to try out this position, this infamous position of sporting director. Come April. I mean, I don't know, and I don't think the normalizadora punto tres or the 3.0, the third regularizadora that we've had, um, should be making decisions beyond trying to get the friggin' bylaws to be up to par with the national sporting law and FIFA. Like that has to get fixed. Like I can't believe we're still talking about this, what, 3 years after the fact, isn't it? It's been 3 years, 2 years. It's like, come on, man. Um, so let's hope that by April we hear some news and see things move forward. But in the meantime, I think we're just set up for more of the same. But no, thanks for your insight, Uwol. Thanks for answering the questions. I think we're gonna wrap up with that. So yeah, don't forget that if Salvador plays on Thursday, get your DVRs ready.
6 p.m. Thursday Pacific time and
Okay.
5:30 p.m. Sunday Pacific time.
If you have Paramount Plus in the US, you'll be able to watch it. Um,
5 p.m. Sunday, sorry, and
okay,
Thursdays at 6 p.m.
perfect. So I'll be able to watch. I'll be home from work on time by then. Anyway, so have a great week. Enjoy, the two matches coming up within the next couple of days. It's a Caribbean doubleheader. Always, I don't know. I can't lie. I don't enjoy watching La Selecta play away. Like, especially when there's playoffs of other sports or other sports on at the same time. It's so hard to justify watching La Selecta if there's like, playoff baseball on at the same time, or if it's on a Sunday and, NFL's back, and it's really, really hard. So I salute to each and every one of you that either has like a second screen with the Selecta game on, or if it's your main screen, even more so. Um, but yeah, here goes to another round of Caribbean Battle Royale. But we'll catch you guys later. We'll probably link up and try and record another episode once this window is closed. The next one will be in November. God, it's almost the end of the year. It's crazy. But in any case, thanks again for watching, supporting. Please help us spread word of mouth, and we'll keep working on getting guests and prepping more episodes to close out the year. So thank you so much. Have a good one.